No, I know he's a baby, but like, I didn't think he was gonna freaking act like one. Like, grow up, Peter Pan head ass.
When I was deciding what I wanted to talk about this week, I realized that children are definitely on my mind, mostly because I'm definitely not having them, and I've been doing my doctor's appointments to sort of solidify that, conclusion. With that said, I was wondering, what are the differences between Gen Z parents and boomers, and did millennials and Gen Xers really accomplish any parenting dreams, and was Gen Z here to break generational curses or repeat them?
I can't with your aura right now.
For context, I'm 36, gonna be 37 pretty soon here. I am married, and we've both decided that being parents is not for us. With that said, I'm a very proud auntie, and I really love playing that role for my nieces and nephews, and I plan on continuing to invest on being definitely the adult in the room and making sure that they have somebody to look up to. Because contrary to popular belief, it actually does take a village.
It takes a village to raise the child. No, it doesn't. You made that bad son of a bitch. Keep him off my lawn.
When I was younger, I actually did want a big family. I wanted 6 kids, so each of them would have a buddy. And I am the third oldest of 10 kids. It wasn't that weird to think that having many kids would be a good idea. But of course, as things went on, I got chronically ill, the economy took a tank, and honestly, I just got older. Right now, my biggest responsibility is that cat you see in the background. And of course, just making sure that we can afford a house, maybe in the future sometime, and or enjoy our hobbies until we die. As much as that sounds bleak to a lot of people, maybe conservatives, obviously for a lot of us in the progressive movement, it's a perfectly good dream.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable.
I wake up every day happy and I go to bed every day happy, and I have no regrets about choosing not to have kids.
We listen and we don't judge.
With that said, if I was to be a parent, I definitely have a standard that I think isn't everyone's, and it's one of the reasons why my partner and I decided not to have kids, because we couldn't even reach our own standard. So one of the things I'm curious about finding out is, did Gen Z reach a standard, or did they just repeat what the boomers did and had kids anyways? If you're new to my channel, my name is Brittany, but you can call me Bert. It is a family nickname, and we are here to defy gender expectations using philosophy through pop culture. And since right now, and for actually the last few years, babies have been trending, technically the birth decline, I wanted to talk about it, but maybe through a different lens. I think there's something a little bit more interesting that I'd like to explore, and that's whether or not we actually do break patterns, or if we repeat them because we're comfortable and it's what we know.
Go to your room and think about what you did.
Go to your room and think about what you did.
Did Gen Z, this myth of the newer generation who would defy the generation before them, did they do that, or did they repeat cycles? So let's check in with Gen Z and see if their parenting styles really differed that much from previous generations.
Boy, if you don't wake up and eat your food.
Bye.
Oh.
Okay, well, one thing that hasn't changed between boomers and Gen Zers, y'all are still bullies. Boomer parents love to bully their kids. You guys think it's so fucking funny. Here's Gen Z doing the same thing. Like, I know you're not thinking before you're moving, some of you, but you really got to think when you're raising a baby. I know you think it's funny, but you're literally just bullying a kid. Like, you're literally bullying an infant. Like, you're literally bullying an infant. Like, are you insane? And I know you think it's funny to scare a baby, but just like process that information. I think there are cute ways to interact with babies, to interact with kids that are funny, but this is just not one of it.
The reason why you guys could afford houses was because
we worked our ass off and bought it.
Okay, but you're trying to say that we don't work.
No,
Everything's very
you're
expensive.
An idiot because you're living in a house paying all that rent.
Okay.
All right? All you got to do is you're
right.
paying more rent than you would a mortgage.
Okay. How am I going to get a mortgage?
Well, you save up your money and
How? I'm paying the rent.
Oh my God, what a freaking asshole.
Obviously, the most frustrating thing about this interaction is just the way that he's talking to her. Maybe this is just how they talk to each other as a family, but I do find it to be unnecessarily cruel. Obviously, it just lacks understanding and empathy, and even though she's laughing, I really don't see what's very funny about it. But this is a typical narrative from boomers, that young people are lazy, and if they just planned better, they would have had houses. Sure, in 2012, while I was in my mid-20s going through a mental health crisis, if I had prepared better, I could have afforded a home. But excuse me, if I was busy Z deciding if I should kill myself or keep on living. And to be fair, I was only pushed into that position by my boomer parents who were homophobic and religious, and I had to make the decision if I was going to keep on living in a homophobic world or take myself out. At 30, I made the decision to keep living after therapy and, of course, philosophical work, which put me here at 36, almost 37 years old, which, yes, put me in the position now to save for a home, which by my calculations, I should be able to afford in 6 to 7 to 9 to 10 to 12 years, depending on the economy and whether or not my job stays stable. So I guess I made the right choice to continue living, but let me tell you, it certainly wasn't easy.
Children should contribute financially to the household once they are teenagers.
Perfectly timed for this video, Jubilee actually just posted a video on parenting. And look, Jubilee is controversial and I really think they are professional clickbaiters. But what I really think was interesting about this particular conversation was the section about money.
So it's not that I need my children to contribute financially once they're teenagers. I'm trying to teach them the value of money and a work ethic.
There was sort of a misunderstanding of what that means between the generations.
I don't agree that they should contribute to my household. I do agree that they need to learn how to manage their money.
There were mixed conclusions where some of the Gen Z and some of the millennial both felt like the children should contribute or learn about money at least, though the way that was heard from other parents was more like, should they pay my electricity bill?
I don't think kids should be paying for their parents' bills because I feel like that hinders them down the line.
100%. It's our job to provide for them.
Yes.
And I think this is the difference here is that some parents are raising children to pay their electricity bills, their phone bills. Not everyone was raised with parents who took care of their finances. And look, as a person who grew up with immigrant parents, my parents weren't even the most financially savvy, but they figured it out and I never had to pay their bills. That is a type of privilege that people take for granted. I can only imagine what it is like to grow up in a world where your parents rely on you to put food on the table or to pay their electricity bill. That truly is life on hard mode, and I really hope that should anyone have children, they really consider that before they bring them into the world. Children are not here to pay your bills.
Parents that make their kids work and pay an actual bill.
Yes, there are some parents that do need that.
I don't have to do that, and that my children won't have to succumb to that. And I think that is a privilege, but there are some people in America and around the world, like their kids have to work in order for the household to make it. That's very unfortunate.
And so it is interesting that when you look from generation to generation, there really isn't that much of a difference. It's really a mixed bag. Some people think kids should learn about money early on, and that just looks different. Other people think that kids shouldn't have to worry about money, but sure, it'd be nice to educate them. These are all very confusing conversations, and I think it's incredibly difficult to be a parent for this reason. How do you raise children who will then be great adults, who will then make the world a great place?
I love you, Mom and Dad. There was something I want to give to you. I am paying off the loan from the bank. Also, I paid off all your debt as well. What? Now, instead of trying to save money every weekend to replace the savings account you drained on traveling to play baseball, you can spend it on yourselves.
One of the greatest differences between millennials and Gen Z is paying off your parents' debt. So obviously we have the households in which parents are not financially responsible and their children have to go to work and pay their parents' bills. Think Shameless. But not everyone's father is Frank Gallagher, so let's assume your parents actually made an effort. So then you grow up thinking, maybe one day I can pay off my parents' house. Coming from an immigrant background, this is a very typical dream of one day I'm going to do better than my parents did and I'm going to pay their bills.
You were trying to process or complete like a payoff for the mortgage?
I would like to schedule $70,000.
So I have gone ahead and sent that over. Once the loan is fully paid off, a confirmation letter would just be or sent out confirming that the loan's been paid off in full. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Fucking shit, man. I'm happy. I really wonder how they gonna react to this. This shit ours now. This right here. Oh, this is ours now.
我要是发狗，我要是发狗，这是home，这是贷款哦，这是我们的那个 house 的贷款哦。我们的 house 贷款，哇
My wonderful boy.
Now, of course, this dream got shattered for a lot of millennials, as many of us can barely manage to buy our own houses at this point, let alone pay off our parents' mortgages. Well, Gen Z is still living with their parents or heavily being supported by their parents. This to me was actually kind of shocking as a millennial who also grew up with that dream of paying off my parents' debt. Obviously, it didn't end up coming true, and my parents actually financially took care of themselves, but should they ever need anything, at least some of us would be able to help. Though, to be honest, it would be stressful given the economy. Even those of us with good jobs, it's still a struggle out here. Now imagine you're Gen Z and your dream is not paying off your parents' rent, it's simply being able to rent on your own. Or heck, maybe some people just dream of renting with roommates instead of living at home with their parents. I will just say, as a millennial who's chosen not to have kids, and money was definitely a part of it, I am kind of shocked that Gen Z is procreating. That must mean that some parts of Gen Z are actually doing financially well, or because they are living with their parents, they're actually better off.
I like how we've collectively as a generation decided like our kids never need to leave home. Like seriously, whenever I see some kind of survey or some kind of question on TikTok, Facebook, whatever, like what age do you think you should have your kids leave home? After 18, how long will you let your kids stay with you? And under the comments is always, never ever. They can stay forever. Forever, ever, forever, ever. And I think that's so cool since most of us were raised under like parents who were like, okay, 18, you either go to college, army, or you gotta get out. And looking back on that was kind of insane. But we all knew in our generation at 18, we had to start making some moves. I'm glad we've learned from that trauma and healed. And that we broke that generational curse. My kids don't never have to leave home. I make all moves with my household with them in mind. I even bought a little house with a downstairs situation. So I'm like, okay, once I get older, I'm just gonna move down in the corner and they can just have the house. I love that for them.
I know in America we often talk about independence and living on your own, but a lot of families do live together. Parents, grandparents, children, grandchildren. So in terms of making babies, I can see why you would maybe want to stay around the grandparents. Though of course that comes with its own downsides, especially when the villagers want to show up exactly the same way you'd like to parent. Because I think people forget the differences between generational parenting is so real, and that's gonna show up with how you, the new generation, wants to raise your kids. And the question always comes down to, how is the village going to discipline the child?
How do you discipline when your kids don't care about anything? This is a controversial one, and it's not one I use very often. But if you literally have nothing to take away from a kid, they don't care about media, they don't care about their toys, they don't care about really anything, you can invent leverage.
To all the parents, I'm genuinely curious. I'm so curious. Why don't y'all spank y'all kids no more? Bro, y'all kids be bad as fuck.
You should discipline your children when they're disgracing themselves. And the reason you should do that isn't because they're bad kids or because it reflects badly on you or because you're angry, but because if they continue to act that way, other people aren't going to want to have them around.
What's the biggest mistake parents make when they try to discipline a toddler for the first time?
So I think parents have unrealistic expectations. That's the biggest issue.
Parenting differences when it comes to discipline are huge, and they will cause rifts in the family. And often they probably should, since a lot of us were spanked as kids and many of us don't spank our kids now. You can see why that would cause an issue between the parents. Heck, your boomer parents might even get defensive and feel like, oh, are you accusing me of abusing you? And all you're trying to do is break a generational curse. And then of course that plays into the idea of the village raising the child. How does the village discipline, guide, or help form a child who will then be a good adult?
Is it ever allowed to parent other people's children?
I do it all the time. There's a way that you could do it, because I was in that age group where, you know, when you were doing something wrong, you got corrected by the neighborhood. They was like, hey, don't do that.
That makes a difference.
You don't put your hands on anybody, right? But I do it to this day. It's just my natural instincts. I cannot help it.
Well, maybe we can eradicate discipline from our vocabulary because we don't believe in punishment here, and instead transfer that language into something more like mentor or guide, which in that case wouldn't require you to hit a child or even punish them by sending them to their room or making them stand in the corner. Instead, hopefully you would sit down and discuss and explain to them in ways they would understand maybe what they did was wrong and how to make amends.
Did you ever fear that if you did something wrong, your mother would, quote, kill you?
My mom would beat the brakes off of me.
That's biblical. Now think about
Don't
this.
spare the rod.
No, this is very important, that kids that do not fear the retribution of their parents
are wild boys.
Exactly.
They're wild.
And the scriptures say this repeatedly, which is that if you do not fear the justice of your parents, then, for example, if you talk to kids who didn't do drugs growing up, you say, why not? Oh, my mom would kill me.
Who are you going to fear? If you don't fear your parents, who are you going to fear?
Yeah, you should fear God and your parents. And by the way, they're substitutes for each other in the sense that the commandment to honor your mother and father so you belong in the land of which you're in is the test. If you cannot honor your earthly parents, you cannot honor your heavenly father.
My dad, and he took out the belt, and my dad was strong, okay? Smacked the shit out of us. And I cried my eyes out, and I never disobeyed him again, but God damn it, I do not respect him now. I think it just generates a fear in children, and that's like kind of an obedience, but it's not, you're generating fear. They're not obeying you because they respect you. They're obeying you because they're scared of you.
Every parent has their own approach, so to each his own. But me personally, if my children are afraid of me, then I am failing them. See, I grew up with a very intense fear of my dad. I was so scared of him that when he would come around, I would literally be at a loss for words. I would be panic-stricken. I would just freeze. What really made me afraid of him was the way that he would degrade me if I did something wrong. He would make me feel like the dumbest person on the planet. And it's taken me literally decades to really understand and realize how much my fear of him impacted me for the next 40 years of my own life. Because I was so afraid to mess up, I would mess up.
We should be teaching men to be providers for the families that they're going to create.
We should be teaching everyone to provide for the village in a way that makes sense. It should not be about gender, men, women. I have a video on providing if you would like to see it, but I do think it is inherently toxic and misogynistic to assume that because men are men, they must provide, when really all of us as adults in the room should be able to stand up and do something for the village. Because at the end of the day, we are all responsible for how the world has turned out. And if that's the logic we're going by, then by the state of the world as it is right now, I would say a lot of us weren't raised as well as we like to think.
Okay, I'm 26 and I just got bullied at Target by a little fucking minion. I hate kids. And he was bullying me because I was passing by him and I said, "Excuse me." And then he mocked me. He's like, "Excuse me." Like, I will beat you up in front of your fucking mom.
If I'm saying your kid's cute, like, I'm lying to you. Sorry. I do not like children. I don't. To be fair, I don't have a child, but I imagine when I do have my own child, I will like the child. But I just don't like kids. Like, nothing about me is like all like, oh, that's so cute. Or like, oh, like I want to hold it. No, I do not like kids. Like, crying babies, nope, not my thing. I don't like it.
We are all responsible for how the world has turned out. Is Gen Z the generation to make a difference? Or is it more like what I actually think should happen, where the youth give their wisdom to the old and the old give their wisdom to the youth, and together we come together to build a good world? Because right now it does feel like Gen Z and older generations, they're not talking to each other. The amount of boomer millennial meltdowns I saw over 6-7 was ridiculous, as if we weren't cringy as children.
14 minus 7 is 7. And 8 minus 2 is 6.
The truth is I do think if you're annoyed with children for being children, you're probably not going to be a good parent and or a good mentor to those kids.
I hate babies. I don't like babies. They're loud, they're obnoxious, and I'm just not the biggest fan of loud, little tiny humans. I hate them.
Did you do research before this?
Wait, no, of course not.
Because I hate kids.
Andrea
That's my
really doesn't
biggest
like
fact.
kids.
I'm not a baby hater. Kids beat me at chess, so I don't like them.
They're loud, they're obnoxious, that I just do not,
Wow. Canceled. When you have kids, how old will they have to be before you put them on trend as well?
Well, they have to come out benching 225 or they're getting aborted personally, but.
Jesus Christ.
And I do think it takes a village. So I do think the adults around us, including myself, need to step up and stop being weird around kids enjoying their cringe memes.
So my opinion is that my kids will be getting iPads because technology is important to learn, and if you don't give them access to technology, you're really stunting them in the long run. And most studies and research indicate that it's not the presence of it, it's the excessive unregulated use of it all that's leading to like behavioral and developmental issues. But it's going to be used in the same way we would use like our Leap pads or the desktop computer at home. At home.
Okay, so I'll just say, like, as a millennial who chose not to have kids, my partner and I do hypotheticals of like, what if we were parents though? And what if we did do that? What kind of parents would we be? And we would be kind of techie parents. I mean, we both have our own offices. We both have our own computers. We both have like 3 monitors. We're very big on the internet. We're very, I always say that even though we're born in 2 different countries, our shared language is internet speak. So for me, I think I would want to raise my kids into being into technology, I think. I mean, ethical technology to the best of our ability, of course, because we're progressive. But my dad did that. I remember when my dad got me my first digital camera, or I remember when he got me my first like computer, or I remember like my first Barbie house he ever built me was out of an old computer frame. So my dad's an engineer and he's very into techie stuff. And even to this day, like, he'll be like, I think I want to build a plane. I'm like, this is an immigrant from Iraq who like came to America and built this like, business with his family. And now that he's retired, he's always talking about building airplanes. It's kind of cute, but also it is one of those things where I think the tech perspective of it is the curiosity perspective of it. It's the desire to build and see what we're capable of. And like, I remember when I got the Oculus and my dad was like, oh my God, let me try that. Like, it's cool. This idea of like, oh, this technology is cool. Obviously, there are ethical issues around like generative AI and all of these problems. And so there's obviously a lot of questions that we need to ask first, but I think our children deserve to be in the world and see it for what it is. I also think they deserve to be on computers. And it's interesting because my brother has like 5 kids and they're being homeschooled and they have a good village. They have a lot of kids they're friends with, but they're being raised kind of like almost like it's the 90s, 2000s, where they watch PBS and they watch all the shows, but they're not on YouTube independently. They don't have their own computers. They do play like Nintendo Switch and they have like technology in the house, but they're not iPad kids traditionally. And I think that's fine. Like, I think they're exposed enough to the world where it's not that bad. But obviously, there's some shelter issues for sure. But it's interesting to watch my brother, who just basically got into his 30s, right? I think he's 30. He must be about 30, 31. I think he's 30, 32 at the most. Okay, I can't think right now of how old he is exactly, but I'm 36, I'll be 37. And it's just interesting to see the way he's raised his kids. And I definitely think like my partner and I would have raised our kids, first of all, much more progressive, obviously. Very, very progressive. Everything opposite of my brother in that regard, since they're very Catholic. And yet, I think there are some really good aspects that my brother is incorporating into his parenting. Like, he is breaking generational curses. He is doing a lot of really good things. And yet, there's still a lot that I'm like, oh, if only he would break this generational curse. So I also have a theory that you can only break as much as you can of a generational curse or generational trauma or the trajectory of your future. So, it's interesting to see how the boomers did it, how Gen X did it, how millennials did it, and how Gen Z did it, and also to see how Gen Z either maintained things boomers taught them and or really changed the way they did things because of the way boomers did it. Because my little brothers, there's 10 kids in the family and like 7 kids are under me. A lot of my little brothers are Gen Z. And so they were raised by boomer parents. So you can imagine my mom was 30 when she had me. And now she's 66, 65, 66, right? My littlest brother is like 24, I think. So if you just think about it from that perspective, it is kind of insane. The differences of the types of parents we had, the types of values we were raised with, the type of technology we were raised with, just like our experiences were totally different. So the question is, when you're raising children, do you want them to have your experience, your childhood experience, or do you want them to have what the current day kids are experiencing? Because I think when I used to think about being a parent, I would like nostalgically think about raising them on 90s and 2000 shows. But the truth is like, they should also know what's going on now. So they, when they're older, can have nostalgia with their peers. And they can look back and be like, oh my God, my childhood. Like, I was just telling my partner, I was too old to watch, what was that show on Disney Channel with Ariana Grande? I don't even know. Sam and Ariana, I think, were in a show together. I don't know what it was because I was too old. But That's So Raven, that was my era. But that difference it can be a big deal between relating to your peers and not. So things to keep in mind when parenting. And I think even if you're not going to have kids, it's important to think about these hypotheticals because you will be aunties, uncles, mentors. You will be people in the community. You will be adults that kids look up to. So I think it's important that people who don't have kids also keep that in mind, right? And especially since I am progressively minded, I do think that it takes a village, and I do think that we owe it to children to raise them in a good world. And so I don't really like the I hate kids narrative.
What's something that you're supposed to like, but that you actually find slightly annoying?
Children. And I don't just find them slightly annoying, I find them fucking annoying. I have known since I was 15 years old that I do not want children, and my mom has known since I was 15 years old that she can plan on having grandpuppies, not grandchildren.
I want to know how people continuously justify hating a group of people who haven't even been around long enough to have a strong sense of self. They're learning how to read, how to write, how to maneuver in the world. Every single thing that they feel, they're feeling for the first time. Everything is loud, it's overstimulating. Every heartbroken is a heartbroken for the first time. Every stub toe hurts for the first time because they have nothing else to compare it to because this is all they know is right now. And y'all hate them for it.
But like, little kids hear you, they see you, they exist, and they don't deserve that. They don't deserve to be brought into a world that's already racist and homophobic and full of genocide. And on top of that, the people in their village are just talking about how horrible they are. Like, they're babies. So you need to get your shit together and stop talking about how much you hate kids and just say what you really hate. You hate the way the world is. You hate the idea of raising children in this world that, yes, when it's, you love your children, but other people's children, but like also, if you believe it takes a village, if you believe in the sanctity of life when it comes to children, not in a pro-life way, in a progressive way, then you believe that children deserve to grow up in a world where adults care about them. So if you think kids should be fed and educated and housed, then you can't go around talking about how much you hate kids. What you hate is the way their parents parented them, or what you hate is the way they were raised, or what you hate is maybe the way that they act because you can't discipline them, even though, you know what I mean? You don't really hate the child. Hopefully you don't, right? You know, our language is really important when it comes to these things, and I just want us to keep that in mind. As I like to say on this channel, we're open with boundaries. So I'm open to helping you babysit the kids or give rides or whatever you might need, but there will be boundaries because at the end of the day, we do not want to take advantage of each other.
Because I told you I was going to be the kind of grandmother that I'm not. Yes, it's a little bit of an open wound.
I honestly love that this conversation was happening. I genuinely love this conversation between the mom and the grandma because she was discussing like, you know, I'm sure that you had expectations that I gave you because when you were pregnant, I really thought I was going to be a different grandparent than I was. And once they were here, I just wasn't as involved as I thought I would be. And the daughter is being very open and vulnerable saying like, yeah, and it really hurt because I don't think I had this like open, vulnerable need for you to be as present until I had children. And then I actually asked for help and you didn't show up after promising the way that you would. And that really hurt. And then the grandma was like, well, I have her once a week and I'll hang out with her on Thursdays and we have a close relationship. But yeah, you're right. That's kind of the most that I'm involved. And they're going back and forth. And I think that's a really healthy dialogue to have because hot take, grandparents aren't required to be babysitters. Like obviously you can't force someone to step up and take care of your child.
I think the issue here is everyone feels differently about what it means to be taken advantage of. And I also think you need to negotiate with the people in your life. Don't take it for granted that people will be your village. Actually negotiate it. I was watching NPR's It's Been a Minute with host Brittany Luce, and something that stood out to me was this conversation about kids and women who don't want them.
But thinking politically, though, I'm glad we're talking about this. Like, our current administration has placed a strong emphasis on the importance of the nuclear family, which always includes children, which makes me wonder, what do child-free adults, especially child-free women, symbolize politically?
Well, it's interesting because I kind of zoom out of all of this and think, like, what does the communities look like? What does society look like? And actually, I feel like child-free women bring a lot to society. You know, if someone is sick, if someone has aging parents, if someone needs someone with free time, someone with more finances, because child-free women normally have more money, I think it's sort of like, well, let's celebrate the auntie figure. Let's celebrate the godmother. Like, these are people in society that I think get stuff done as well.
Do you just want to pause here and understand why this particular comment really activated the comment section of this video? And I can understand that the implication that you don't have children, so you have free time, is really misunderstood. I don't think that's what she means to say in this particular segment. I think the implication is that I didn't have kids, so I have a different way of spending my time. But I'll just say, as a person with no kids, I never have time for anything. I mean, I really have to work really hard to find 2 hours in my week to like redo my nails. So, and I do them at home by myself, you know what I mean? Because these nail prices out here are crazy. So you can just understand why this particular comment activated a lot of people who already feel like they're struggling as it is. And to be fair, I'm chronically ill and there's other layers involved here and I'm disabled and all these other things. So I can understand. I also work 6 days a week. Like, you know, I get 1 day a week to really catch up with family and friends in a real way. And I try to do a date night every other week. And it's just like, there's a lot of things, like your regular life ends up getting scheduled into your, basically like a workbook, you know? And I think this is the struggling part of this particular conversation that threw people off a little bit. But I will just say that, you know, when I lived near my nieces and nephews, one of my favorite times was when my brother would drop them off for a few hours, you know, so I could watch them and have fun with them. And I really value building memory with my nieces and nephews because my older cousins and aunties and uncles are really important for my childhood. And with growing statistics showing that middle children and cousins are basically becoming obsolete, I just think it's really difficult for us to talk about collective and villages and community and then not be there for the community. And I understand it's a struggle, but I think in the right kind of community, you can still make it work. It doesn't have to look the way you think it should. It should work the way that it does.
Cappuccino ballerina. You need to start saving with a high yield savings account. Flaming hot Cheetos. AI.
Trisha Paytas. Vas a ser la más chingona. The best part is, when you're older, Trump is gonna be dead.
Okay, my hot take is that Gen Z is the perfect example of everyone wants a village, but does not want to be a villager.
So I'm going to have to talk over this audio because of copyright, but basically it's a man standing there saying, they say it takes a village to raise children, and then his wife pops up and says, this is our village. Your life should work the way that it does and not the way you think it should work, if that makes sense. It's something my therapist told me and really helped me. Instead of reaching for this idea of what you want your life to be, you should just be joyful, and whatever that is, keep doing that. And this brought me here into the life that I have now, and I am very happy. But even though I am so joyful, I still have really limited time during the day to feel like I'm getting everything I want done. And to be fair, that also comes from a place of feeling like I want to do everything. Like I'm in a really good place in my life. I really value existing, and I want to be alive, and I want to do all these great things. And most of those great things, by the way, are just really just being at home and cooking and enjoying my time with family and friends, and really relaxing, to be honest, which I think is, you know, sort of a ideal goal for a lot of people. I think a lot of people yearn for the days of faux relaxing, you know, this myth of people were just sitting around all day, which I don't think actually ever existed, but I think the image of it is really nice. It's like, I call it the Miyazaki cope. You know, people want a Ghibli Miyazaki life, but they don't understand that like nobody is ever actually just sitting around all day. It's kind of like this myth that women never worked, even though for all of human history, women always worked. It's just like, it's a myth we tell ourselves because we're stressed. Instead of reaching for a life that's joyful, we yearn for a life that never existed. So, you know, moving towards a more progressive future, the question is, how do we bring about a life that is not only accessible and a reality, but is one that will sustain us as a village and as an individual?
So if we're talking about the stigma of kind of women maybe not being maternal if they don't want kids, actually there's so much maternal nature to a lot of women that don't have kids, even by choice. Like they can really help the village with the children, and it's something that I like really pride myself on.
It's a really good point. The auntie figure, or the child-free woman more broadly, as a person who may have more time to joyfully give to other pursuits, but also at least in the United States, as we have not a lot of great structure from our government as far as caretaking is concerned, when it is time to take care of sick family members, or or when other people do need let's say support with childcare or with elder care, it is child-free people or child-free women who end up sort of filling in those gaps. Women more broadly,
and I
filling
mean,
in those
maybe
gaps.
it's not great that we don't need to like put it on people, but I love it. I love being like someone who can help and be of service in that way. I think it like adds a lot of joy to my life to be the person that maybe can offer those resources.
As I keep going through all of this content and I'm trying to figure out where everyone is coming from, I think everyone is coming from a desperate place for independence and feeling like they have a say in their life and wanting to make new babies, to have sort of maybe to give them an opportunity to have a say in their life. But really, they're fulfilling a script. And the script that they're fulfilling, I think, is coming at sort of the expense of everybody involved, because it really isn't coming from an informed place. One of the things that I see in all of human history and then moving into the modern age is a lack of knowledge. The clip you're about to see is from the Jubilee Gen Z versus millennial parents. And I just want you to take note that the question they were asked is who had it harder in terms of parenting. And this is Gen Z's response. Please note he's going to say something like, all knowledge is in our pocket because it's on the phone. And then he's about to say something so ignorant, and that's the irony of having everything in your pocket. It doesn't mean you know how to research, dissect, and it doesn't mean you understand media literacy. So when you're consuming all this great information on your phone, you still have to know how to discern what is good information and what is bad information.
Those are definitely new challenges that we're all facing. At the same time, I do think we have it a lot easier than previous generations because we have the hive mind in our pocket. Literally all the information that we'd ever need is in our pocket. Any resource, we can just look it up. For example, one of the biggest problems people in our past had was schooling. You couldn't move out into the middle of nowhere because you couldn't go to a good school. Now you can go to a good school right from your computer. People don't understand is that housing is expensive, but if you move out into the middle of nowhere, it's not so expensive.
How old are your kids?
They are 3, 2, and 1.
Okay.
Yep. And I'm a stay-at-home dad. So
Period, King.
that's another thing. Nowadays, our parents couldn't work from home, and husbands were going off to wars, but the world is a lot more of a peaceful place nowadays. There's a lot of wars going on for sure, but not like the past. You know, we're not having world wars right now.
I remember talking to my partner about whether or not we would have kids. And I told them, like, we're going to have to take classes. We're going to have to read books. Like, I've been reading books about parenting since I was a kid, and I'm going to need you to be on board, right? None of those conversations are exactly happening in any of these interviews or back and forths. And so for me, what I'm seeing in terms of repeating a pattern is sort of the lack of knowledge pattern, you know? And I understand that parenting books can often go viral and be really bad for people and have terrible advice for parents. And I think that's also something you should be cautious about. I think you should read all books, even bad books, but you should learn that they're bad books and maybe bad parenting advice. But I will say, I feel like people just keep going in blind. They keep making babies blind. They don't have the education or knowledge. They're surprised when their 9-year-olds are asking them about things on the internet. They don't know what they mean. You know, they don't get the memes. And I think that that's the point, and that's always going to be the issue with all of us as a species, is that we continuously move with ignorance. And I think ignorance is the foundational requirement for bigotry, and I think bigotry is a manifestation of fear. And I think that without proper knowledge to mitigate that fear, you will be bigoted, you will raise bigoted children, and it will continue because of this foundation of ignorance that you built your life on. And so for me, when I think about Gen Z breaking those generational curses, I don't see much of that happening. What I see instead is an attempt for them to do exactly what their parents did, which is to like basically have kids and figure it out. You'll often hear people say like, oh, there's no right time to have a kid. I think there are better times to have kids than not have kids. And I also understand from a deeply empathetic and compassionate perspective that not everybody gets to choose when they have kids. Obviously, we're not talking about the very dark side of assault and forced impregnation and, you know, coerced pregnation. So we have to understand that for a lot of us, it is a place of privilege to even talk about choosing when to have a kid, to plan your parenthood, right? And I understand that as somebody who paid $1,200 to put Nexaplanon in her arm, not everybody has $1,200 to go get birth control. And it's only good for 3 to 5 years, and you have to replace that. And, you know, that's a lot of money for people. So I understand that a lot of Planned Parenthood is a point of privilege, right? To say that I'm educated, to say that I'm well read, to say that I know how to not have a baby or have a baby, like all of that is a point of privilege. And I think everyone deserves that privilege. Everyone deserves informed consent, not just when it comes to intimacy between you and another person, but when it comes to bringing life into the universe, because being pregnant is no joke. I just want to give an example really fast. I'm so surprised this doesn't have more coverage, though I'm not that surprised because we live in a white supremacist country that doesn't give an F about people of color having babies, even though they are so at risk. This story about Charisse, she was forced into a court hearing while in labor to debate whether or not she could have a C-section or vaginal birth. It's a devastating story and it needs more coverage, but these are the real consequences to being pregnant in 2026, and I want you to pay attention. Even though this case happened technically in 2024, this was absolutely a foreshadowing of what's to come.
I have not had a chance to be able to consult with my own legal representation, and I'm trying to understand how you are taking my rights away as a patient to be able to decide my own care, to give me an emergency C-section against my will.
Well, let me ask you about that. What about the risks to the child?
Anytime you go into childbirth, whether you do a vaginal or a C-section, there's inherent risk to the mother and the baby. If I die from a C-section, nobody on this call is going to take care of my children.
Well, you have a new doctor coming on. I don't know.
Yeah, no, they don't have nobody African American that they can give me.
I don't know that. Then I don't find that race really has much to do with this, ma'am.
It does have much to do with it because historically, Black people do better when they have healthcare providers that look like it. It's nobody Black in here.
And so I do think a lot of, especially young people, Gen Z people, but not much different from the boomers before them, I think they fell into this romanticization of parenting. So I think humans are probably going to continue doing that for who knows how long. But I think there are pockets of us that are attempting to encourage people to be well informed. And especially as a person who decided not to have kids, it's amazing to me how many parents come to me for advice. But also that makes sense. I was a professional nanny. I'm the third oldest of 10 kids. I've also read all the books. And so, you know, I think that them coming to me for advice makes a lot of sense. I always say like some of the best parents in the world are people who decided not to have kids, you know, and I think I'm one of them because remember, like we were children. And so we also understand that a lot of us not choosing to have kids comes from that knowledge. And so when you take that into consideration, it just ends up making a lot more sense for why people do come to us for advice. And with that said, I think, again, I love children. I think children deserve the world. And so I think the difference here is I'm not coming from a place of bitterness or hate for kids. I really think that needs to be deconstructed. I really think people need to ask themselves, like, why do you hate kids so much? And then I need you to understand that, again, like, the irony of you taking out your trauma on children is just such a repeating of a pattern. So again, I will never blame children for the state of the world, but I will absolutely hold the adults accountable for the way these children are being raised and for the way these young children end up coming up in the world. I mean, these very young children, you know, killing their parents or shooting up schools, like that didn't just happen in a vacuum. Right? That's not just the parents raising them. That's all of society, especially the US. Like, United States is so uniquely violent, and these kids are picking up on that. So all of this to say, and I think this is kind of the point, that Gen Z, I don't think is exceptional in any regard in terms of parenting, though I do see some really good parts of it, like breaking generational curses, thinking about therapy, sort of like variations of informed consent. But I think mostly they will repeat the same patterns, because they will repeat the simple pattern of building their parenting on a foundation of ignorance. And that ignorance will repeat that cycle, because that's what it is at the end of the day. And so I hope that this video encourages you and inspires you to read a book on parenting, to research, maybe go to some classes, talk to other parents, and to remember that sometimes the best people to go to for advice in your family happen to be people who didn't have kids, because a lot of them came to that conclusion for a very good reason. And keep in mind, in order to come to that reason, assuming that they've chosen truly not to have kids and they're not in a situation where they want to have kids but they can't, assuming they really chose not to have kids, they probably came to that decision in a very informed way, and they probably have a lot of wisdom to give to you, and they probably, you know, if they're a happy person at least, probably, you know, will be happy for you to be a parent and would like to be supportive by giving you that advice, you know, because again, as long as they're not bitter, they really had to contend with all of society, judgment, especially if they're a woman or raised femme. You know, they've had to really love themselves enough, love their joy enough to give up on a dream and a script that was fed to them from birth. So sometimes those are the best people to go to for advice. Okay, with that said, I would love to hear your thoughts. I'm excited to read them in the comment sections down below. Thank you for watching, liking, subscribing, and I will see you for the next one. Bye-bye.